Hi, Gillian. This is Sid. So nice to have you. For the benefit of everyone, welcome to Wokelo Insights podcast. We have this special series called Agents in Finance. And today I'm really privileged to have a great guest, Gillian from KPMG. She's a senior partner and really delighted to have her join us. In today's podcast, we'll be going through Gillian's own experience working at KPMG, doing a bunch of due diligence across sectors and really learn from her how has been the uptake of tech, how has the whole M&A landscape evolved, and so much more. But before I jump in, I do want to welcome Gillian again. Thanks so much for being on a podcast. I've obviously given a very quick background about yourself, but it would be best if you could give an introduction for the benefit of the audience.
Sure, sure. Thanks very much. Well, as I said, I really appreciate the invite, and it's a privilege to be here. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. For the folks that don't know me, which is probably a lot, I'm Gillian Morris. I'm a partner, as Sid said, at KPMG. The way you need to think about me is for the last sort of 30 years, I've been really working to help companies grow profitably. And really, that's either organic or inorganic. And so as a result of the inorganic piece, I've done a lot of deals, primarily helping companies on the commercial diligence side and then translating that into pre-close and post-close integration and also value creation as well. So I've worked on the corporate side, I've worked with private equity, and I also work with a couple of family offices as well. So I think, Sid, we're going to have a great conversation because I've been in this industry so long. I can help everybody understand really how it's really changed, I would say, over the last 3 to 4 years through AI and tech and stuff like that. So, so you can just fire questions at me. Happy to have a conversation and see how we go.
Absolutely. Thanks so much again. Gillian, probably a starting point would be just to go back in time, probably start with one of your earlier first few engagements of commercial due diligence or just due diligence at large. And then probably fast forward now in 2025, have things even changed?
Yeah. Oh no, they've changed massively. So I think so if you take a step back and think about KPMG, we operate this multidisciplinary model where, we can provide diligence services, pretty much whatever our client requires. So that goes from financial diligence, commercial, where I'm experienced in, operational, we can do tax, HR, IT, pre-close and post-close. We can also offer things like accounting advisory for corporates. But I think, and obviously post-close, we do integration and things like that. But I think how it used to be was very, I would say, pretty manual, pretty Excel historically, and then a lot of on the commercial diligence side where you're really trying to validate the target's business model, a lot of sort of interviews, looking at market research reports to look at the TAM and the SAM and stuff like that. I would say a lot of busy work, which is important busy work, but a lot of that busy work now, we're able to do that through data analytics and AI. So on the commercial diligence side, we were typically looking at sort of secondary market research reports, doing expert interviews, surveys, things like that. But I think what we've done now is we're better able to come up to speed very quickly now on a market or even a company so that we can better test like what is the investment thesis that our client has, okay? And but more importantly, are the key questions that we think we were going to ask the right questions now, based upon the fact that instead of taking maybe 3 days to come up to speed, we can get up to speed in pretty much like a couple of hours. And that's not exaggerating. Okay. However, there has to be this human in the loop. And so what we typically do when we're leveraging advanced analytics or Gen AI platforms, what we typically do is, I've worked a lot in the chemical industry. So if we've got a chemical diligence, I'm typically involved really just to help pressure test what is coming out of the Gen AI, just to really pressure test it to see whether anything has been hallucinated or something like that. So I think what we've found is, we call it speed to insight in diligence, that's really accelerated so that we can really take more time actually thinking and helping our clients think about like the value creation aspects of this deal and indeed the risks of the deal as well. Okay, because I think if you look at like the financial diligence piece or the operational diligence piece, there's a lot of data there that has to be digested. That can now be done through advanced analytics and AI. And it really then provides us a bit more time to take a step back and think about, right, so what does that really mean? And how can we really help our client think about this deal and understand the risks? So that was a lot. So maybe I'll pause there, see if you have any sort of follow-on questions. That's obviously at a very, very high level. And you
So
can
that's
probably tell
super
I'm
helpful.
very excited. So I'm pretty much a dinosaur in CDD, but I'm super excited because I've seen just how it can change the way that we can serve our clients for the better, actually. Super more insightful, thoughtful, and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I think you raise a very interesting point where probably unlocking more time for the critical thinking, for more value add by using these technologies. And we'll probably we'll go deeper into those in a bit. But that takes me to my next question, which is how does KPMG broadly differentiate itself in terms of diligence, in terms of M&A advisory, and how does that really, translate into using AI? Because, a lot of people worry that AI can really influence your process because you're getting lazy. It was fine till a calculator was okay for a phone to, not remember maps, but there's a lot of cognitive load that's going or being offloaded to AI, which is great. It's unlocking a lot of time. But how are we differentiating at KPMG before and after this tech? Uh, would love to hear your thoughts. How do you work in conjunction with AI? But what largely is the manual process, the legacy process that has been different, and how will you ensure that AI actually understands that it codifies the institutional knowledge that KPMG has had, or any company for that
But
matter?
no, I think there's the saying, we have to have a human in the loop. We have to have multiple humans in the loop. So what AI is never going to replace is the trusted relationship that we have with our clients. Okay. So we are only as good as the last project that we do or advice we provide to a client across the board, whether we're working with a tax client or an audit client, or we're actually doing some M&A with another client. So I think that's very important. But I think one of the differentiations is, we do firmly believe in having industry expertise on every single team. And I think that can often be the I can't really think of a better term, but like the canary in the coal mine. So so someone like me, for example, who's worked a lot in the chemical industry and specialty chemicals, can look at an output, and based upon my experience, really sort of say, yeah, that makes sense, or no, it doesn't make sense, or we need to dig more deeply here. So I think it's almost like that's the sort of safety valve, and it's very, very important. So, I've seen over the last couple of years how AI and advanced analytics can really change the way we do things, and that can really only come from experience, but also working with people on the team that have that industry experience. So what we typically like to do is on our teams, again, I'll stick with commercial. So we have commercial diligence practitioners that can pretty much execute commercial diligence. We actually have those in each industry. So there's always, partners like myself, managing directors, senior associates that work in that industry. Okay, so that's one thing. And then we obviously also have folks that are extremely good at data analytics. So I think if you combine that, and then the wrapper is the governance piece. So it's super important to make sure you've got the governance right. I think everybody's got a very, very enthusiastic about Gen AI, but you have to make sure you have the right governance systems in place. You're protecting your customers, you're protecting your company from risk, and the risk could be cyber or something like that. So hopefully that's a bit long-winded way of answering the question, but hopefully it did. So
It does
yeah.
totally. And I think I want to double click on the whole governance piece because that's important, right? I think what a lot of the audience will be very curious to learn is while it's easy for startups like us to probably move very fast and break things, but there's so much of reputation and prestige and relationships that bigger firms like KPMG also have to cater to. So there's a delicate balance between the speed of moving fast with tech, yet having that governance oversight that things really are where they should be. How has the firm kind of treated through this delicate balance?
I think we come at it from a, and this is where I think it benefits us because we have an audit practice. So audit is all about maintaining trust in the markets, and that's where that piece of our culture really helps on the governance piece. So we have our own AI bots and everything like that. So we have those. In most cases we've developed them. In other cases, and Sid, you probably went through the ringer with Wokelo. But I just think we need to be. We're very pragmatic, and fundamentally we cannot put the company at risk, and also we cannot put our clients at risk. And our clients, on a deal perspective, and a deal setting, is our client that might want to purchase the asset, but it's also the target, and it's everything in between. It's all the other advisors and things like that. So sometimes it can be frustrating, but you just have to get over it because you have to recognize that we're mitigating risk for everybody in the loop.
Absolutely, and I think I can vouch for that because while going through the whole process, uh, I think what we really liked about KPMG as such was the speed at which the team moved. We were very surprised for a Big Four to move at that kind of brisk pace, yet be cautious about data privacy and security. And taking that crawl, walk, run approach where, hey, we have private equity sponsored clients, we have targets, and there's sensitive data being shared. And if you're using an external vendor like Wokelo or any other, being cautious of not letting people upload data right from day one, right?
Yeah,
Let
yeah.
it pass through all the security guidelines. And I think that culture, that governance, and of course, taking it from the audit, practice that we have, I think is super helpful. I'll probably switch tracks now. I think one of the elements of due diligence and CDD has always been in private markets, data is so scarce. And how do you really collate that data? But my question is more around what has been your approach? What have been some non-traditional data points that you have leveraged in your DDs? And whether it's chemicals or resources, I think those industries will have even sparse data. So I'm curious to hear how have you typically approached in those difficult scenarios and really leveraged something which is non-obvious or non-traditional.
I think sometimes it gets to the soft things, like, for example, one soft thing is like sort of culture and things like that. In the commercial diligence, it's actually very important to understand the similarities and differences between a client's culture and a target's culture. And to understand the target's culture, it can be quite difficult. And we can do that in a number of different ways through speaking to, through doing interviews and things like that. But that also is highlighted when we think about integration. And I'll give you an example. Often the sort of go-to-market piece, so how a company goes to market to sell its products or its technology to customers, what does that look like and how do they do that? Often that is sort of, it's almost like, it's not necessarily forgotten, but it's sort of obscured by everything else that's going on. And what I found certainly in my industry is that if companies don't understand that go to the cultural piece on the go-to-market. For example, is the target company a hunter or a farmer? Is our client a hunter or a farmer? If you've got two hunters, it's okay. If you're a farmer and you're buying a hunter, you're going to have tricky. It's going to be very tricky, and you have to think very, very carefully. So there's no data around that whatsoever. It's more around speaking to your client and understanding that aspect, speaking to the target and understanding aspect, and then you can then provide some advice. And quite frankly, there's no data. And I don't even think, well, maybe you and I need to brainstorm afterwards. I'm not sure if there's a Gen AI platform that could get you there. It's very human. It's very human, okay? And that's very important. So that's just one aspect of a lot of the deals I've been involved with. I do think some of the other non-traditional data points, there is a piece around IT infrastructure, and there's also a piece around cyber. Okay, we've seen that when companies are doing have announced an acquisition, sometimes that alerts other bad actors to do a cyber attack. So that's also very important to do in the diligence process, to look at your controls, but also the target's controls. And then obviously IT is IT. There's vulnerabilities in the potential vulnerabilities in the IT. The integration of the IT systems is often very, very complicated and takes a lot of time. And so that's that. And then the other piece, which is again more of a human understanding, is sort of like, okay, so the company you're buying, what is the brand you're buying? Okay, and how is that perceived by its employees, but also by customers and things like that? I think there's probably a Gen AI thing you can do with that, but again, it's some of this sort of touchy feely stuff. So that's how we. What I'm trying to say is, not everything is you can just like come up with a bot and things like that. So
Totally, totally. I remember my consultant days when I just started in strategy consulting, and there were often times when we would be interviewing vendors, let's say for a partner program. There are things which can be mechanized, but there are things in conversations with respect to culture, with respect to perception, that are so difficult to kind of assess. And my interpretation as a junior consultant was very different from a manager, because they've done it over and over a period of time. I think, and those are exactly the kind of things where I believe AI is not there yet, and it's a little far away. Loved the angle on culture as well, because culture, perception, and how do you measure that through conversations? I think that can be touchy feely, but that's where I think practitioners like yourself kind of come
yeah.
in.
I just want to just interrupt. There is another piece. So if you take a look at, say, a target's customer list, you're going to get all of, hopefully, well, maybe in your exclusivity, you're going to get, a lot of customer data. And you'll probably see that some customers have been very loyal, maybe for 5 to 10 years. Okay, so that's very clear on the data. But then you need to ask yourself why. Okay, so that's where the human element comes in. And it's like, okay, so why is that customer so loyal? Is it because there's a fabulous relationship somewhere in the organization that maintains that high value customer, which contributes a lot of EBITDA to the P&L? Is it that, or are you selling them some sort of product that's irreplaceable? Okay,
Mhm.
so the data analytics can only get you so far, and then you really have to start asking. The humans have to ask the why question, and typically those are answered through human to human interaction, through interviews like you just said. So hope you don't mind the introduction, but I just thought I'd just try and
No, absolutely.
pull that apart a bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Gillian, as a founder, I, of course, would have a bias to say that, hey, AI can automate everything. But if I go back to my consulting days, I would be really nervous to just hand over a client AI generated output.
No, you
I
can't.
don't
Yeah.
think I would ever do that.
And
And I think,
actually, I can tell now if like an email's been generated through AI or a report has been generated through AI. So we KPMG, we need to be really careful. We should never ever ever be just, you know, we need to make sure that the what is coming out of any data analytics or any report that's been generated through Gen AI actually makes sense, is valid, and it needs to be sort of pressure tested. I think we can take a report that's been generated through AI and then build on that and ask the why questions. I think that's how they need to be used.
understood, really helpful. I want to now move towards the general tactical applicability of AI in CDD. And what we've been hearing from some of our other customers and partners is, uh, of course, depending on where you sit, whether you're an investment banker, whether you're a sponsor, whether you're a consulting firm, but in the whole deal cycle, from a deal sourcing to screening to prelim due diligence, final due diligence, execution, negotiation, pricing, all the way to post monitoring. There are probably slivers of areas where maybe AI works, where it doesn't work. But I want to get your perspective. With 30 years plus of experience, you would have a better sense of where AI must be used, has better applicability, and where it's probably a few years, and probably maybe I should take that back, probably a few months away because things are moving so fast.
Yeah, they are.
But just want to get your perspective of applicability across the deal life cycle.
I mean, I think anything that has large volumes of data is totally skewed to, you can totally use data analytics, you can totally use a Gen AI platform to ingest that data and then make sense of it, in terms of cut the data and things like that, so that we can then as humans look at that and start to interpret it. So I think that really has accelerated. And I'll give you a few examples in a minute. I think, even building a sim now, you can actually do that through Gen AI. Okay, you can ingest the target's data, you can then ingest various views of the market and things like that, and you can have a pretty much maybe a 60 or 70% sim that then needs the human overlay. So I do agree with you. I think throughout the commercial diligence life cycle, Gen AI does have its place. But to my point earlier, there are places where you really have to have the humans in the loop asking the why, because usually when you ask why, that really helps you understand, is the target really what our client thinks it is? Okay. And that often, and if it is, and they have this great position, then obviously they might try and really go hard after it. And in which case they're going to have to pay a higher multiple. Maybe they introduce a bit more risk, so they have to be super sure. I think where I've seen it just really accelerate timelines is, for example, KPMG has developed, and obviously our hugely strong governance system, a contract reader. Okay, so very recently we used that on an acquisition, and then it was followed by integration, where we used it to literally read in very short order tens of thousands of contracts. Okay, to really try and understand, is there an opportunity to harmonize? And if we harmonize, what is the value creation option for that? There was also one area where we could look at, okay, so if our client buys this, what are some of the levers it can pull based upon those contracts with those specific customers that they can realize on day one? Okay, it might be changing the terms of payment terms. It might be leveraging pricing, and we could never do that in a couple of days. It would take weeks and often months. So I've seen that with the sort of acceleration, and then I also think there's just one of the elements of diligence, and we work very closely with financial diligence and operational diligence. It's all around value creation. Okay, so if our client is going to buy this company and we're going to say we put synergies aside, are there some operational improvement levers that we can pull? Okay, are there other levers that we can pull? And I think what we're able to do is we're able to much more efficiently understand that. So it's almost like we're accelerating the path to value, okay, by using Gen AI. So we can take a step back. We've invested a lot in a benchmarking platform, leveraging Gen AI technology, which is very, very sophisticated. So we can look at the target and we can say, okay, what are some of the other benchmarks, and what are the levers that we can pull? And it's across the P&L, okay? And that will then help our client, especially if it's a private equity client, and this might be a platform, like a platform build. So this is the first, this is the platform they're building, and then going to add others. That will really help them just get the platform set, do some cost takeout, and then start doing some buy and build. So I think we do see it across, but again, big cautionary tale, there has to be governance and there has to be humans asking why. Does that make sense? So it has to be this combination of the different teams. And also you have to enable those teams just to call it, right? Just to question, say, I don't think this is right. And if someone says, well, the data says it, well, I'm sorry, but that's not the right answer. You need to sort of roll up your sleeves and work with your data team, and you need to bring the industry insight to really understand, is this actually making sense? Otherwise, you're just going to go down a rabbit hole. So, and never
That's
come
true.
out, which is not good in a deal because it's going to take a lot of time, and you need to have time to help you to really provide your clients with really solid and trusted advice. So,
Understood. This is a good segue into my next topic, which is more around the talent and workforce. Uh, you know, even till my generation, Gillian, we've been trained to, do everything manually, all the research, all the digging, all the PowerPoint decks. And now we see this new generation, which is, Gen AI native, ChatGPT native, uh, and they pretty much have everything on their fingertips. Do you worry that there could be an impact on the quality of talent or the way we used to groom it through very rigorous training? Uh, are they getting spoiled, if I could use that word, just because of the luxury of these AI tools? How does it impact the workforce? How does it impact the training? How are you thinking about it? How is KPMG thinking about the workforce in terms of, of course, there's an upskilling part of it, there's an operational efficiency part of it, but there's also, what if these systems fail? And to your point, you have to question everything. You can't just take everything at a face value. You want to have that human in loop, that governance structure. So curious to hear what would your assessment be of the impact on workforce?
so I think if I take a step back, we have 4 or 5 generations in the workforce in the minute at KPMG, okay? Which is really, I find it absolutely fascinating because when you work with different generations, they bring different approaches to, to work. Like you and I said, obviously, we come from a very manual, historical, history, right? So when I first went to work, no computers, no cell phones, no fax machines. The only piece of like real technology we had was a telex machine, and we had a very, very scary person who used to run that because she had control of the whole company because she had the telex machine, right? We had phones that used to just pick up and dial and stuff. I'm really old, so there we go.
When I joined my first consulting gig, we did have, of course, computers. We were probably transitioning from the CD-ROMs to, just
Yeah,
cloud. So
yeah.
the cloud was, the next big thing back then when I was starting. But the way things have moved in the last just couple of years is amazing.
I remember having to print off like overhead projector slides, but that anyway, whatever. Let's move. Actually, one anecdote I would just like to. I know this is probably going to help the audience, but I was talking to the chief technology officer of a very, very large organization. And I was asking questions similarly to the questions you're asking me, but mainly around the R&D sort of structure and processes. And it was very interesting. What they do is they have their PhD scientists and their R&D groups, but they actually have data analytics folks working side by side, so that they're trying to install the sort of data piece, the analytics piece, the Gen AI piece, so that they can really learn and understand better from some of the experiments. So I thought that was really really quite insightful.
It is. That's
Yeah.
refreshing. And I'm also, I wanted to probably now think through, there's a huge technology shift that's kind of going on, and we're right in the middle of it. From the outside, it appears like API is taking a very pragmatic approach of build versus buy. There are certain capabilities that should be built in-house, and you're also very pragmatic to, partner with many different vendors like ourselves. What has been the criteria? What has been the success criteria? On what kind of a decision framework do you kind of decide that this is strategic, this has to be in-house, or this has to be probably outsourced, or we probably partner with someone? I'm curious to hear how do you think? How does the firm think?
I think how we think is, I think it's if things are truly going to be differentiating for us, we will probably do it in-house and protect it. However, if things are moving in the external environment very quickly, like for example with Wokelo and things like that, we have the ability to invest and buy, okay, and that's through our venture group. So I actually think it's it's quite good that we can actually make a very informed buy or build decision, recognizing that the build is going to take longer. Okay. But with the buy, it's probably going to be a much shorter runway. However, we need to really evaluate the risks on that. And the risks are all around risk to reputation. It's all around the AI governance and things like that. So I think we're very lucky in that we are allowed to do that.
That's really interesting because, as KPMG with a fairly sophisticated IT and tech practice, having an audit practice, tax, and so many more. It helps in your governance. It helps in building capabilities in-house. It helps having domain experts and data analytics team all kind of partner and come together in, cases like these. And I think that's really what the future is, right? I think very cross-functional kind of skill sets helping you. I'm I'm also curious when you think about deploying Gen AI or, let's take Wokelo as an example. Is the primary objective for operational efficiency? Is it more around getting access to differentiated insights or, informing outcomes? What is the primary driver for adopting Gen AI tools, for yourself, for KPMG? Uh, because I've heard very different things from people. Somebody wants to just use it for business development and revenue maximization, business development. Others from just cutting time and being faster to market. Some probably to generate alpha if they're able to unlock unique insights. But I'm curious to hear where you're coming from and how does the firm think through.
I think I'm just going to pick Wokelo. So I think Wokelo, we leverage that because it's speed to insight. Okay, so it really provides us with, a very solid base on a market, a company, or a value chain, or something like that, from which we can then leverage it to ask the right questions in a commercial diligence, or leverage it to better understand a client's question or an issue they might have. So that's how we use that. So I think there might be an efficiency play there, but more importantly, it's an insight piece because you through the Wokelo platform, you can access a lot of different types of insights, put them together, and then we can then leverage that, and we might want to add some of our own. So that helps us in commercial diligences. It also helps us in business development as well. And it's it just helps. It's really helping across the board, across all the different functions that we have. But I think how is KPMG adopting Gen AI? Well, we are leveraging it internally. So putting some of the diligence agents aside, we are using it internally to really. So what we've done in a lot of processes, front but mainly back office processes, we've really looked at, what are the tasks that are being performed, and then we think about, can we automate some of those tasks? If we automate some of those tasks, that's where Gen AI comes in. And I think it's really helped us, get a better understanding, sometimes fundamentally of the business and how it's going. I think it really helps us be a bit more, I think it helps us serve our clients better. But also fundamentally, we also do get some cost efficiencies with that as well. Okay, so we've looked at what the internal processes that we run, what can we automate that gets to Gen AI data analytics, and then with the other processes, onshore versus offshore and things like that. Okay, and humans, and we need to have humans. We can't just deliver everything through Gen AI. So I think we've realized a lot of, I would say a lot of efficiencies. But with our clients, so that's more internally, but with our clients, we really have to make sure that we still continue to be the trusted advisor, and we leverage obviously Gen AI to do that, but we're leveraging all sorts of other more human skills as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And obviously, I'm just going to say it again, governance. Make sure you have the right governance in place, because that's going to, if you have that in place, you're going to be fine. And if you don't, or there's holes in it, you really might face some issues in the future.
I think those are probably a couple of the most important takeaways from this discussion. The point around governance, because we see many of the even larger firms we've been chatting with kind of struggle because they don't have a mechanism institutionalized, which kind of, has those micro rules of where to use Gen AI, where not to use Gen AI, uh, how to, I mean, source traceability itself, and where are you getting that information from, the authenticity and credibility of that data, and the ability to go back and check is so important. So I totally hear you. I want to use the last part of what you said in terms of just delivering projects, whether it's speed to insight, whether it's your operational efficiency. End of the day, you are a trusted advisor to the clients you serve, and there's so much of domain experience that kind of comes in, the wisdom from so many prior cases. How do you think tech will largely, or AI for that matter, will, if at all, uh, change any consulting business models or operating models? Do you think uh, you're noticing certain trends or certain directional movements where if it was a 6 week due diligence projects, is there pressure coming that, hey, it has to be done in 4 weeks? Or are sponsors still telling you that, hey, I have 6 weeks, I have the budget. This is a very important target for me, like every investment is. So it doesn't matter whether you're using Gen AI or not. We just want that final output. But my question largely is the operating model, engagement models going to change much with Gen AI in consulting?
I mean, we're using it already just to sort of better automate very light, just boring processes, just automating tasks. So I think that's very valid, and our clients understand that. I think we're not getting pushback from clients to reduce the time frame, because fundamentally, as if they're going to make an investment decision, they need to know what are the risks involved in that. They need to understand pieces around valuation, the levers for improvement, what the synergy target could be, how they need to sort of message it, what's the narrative to the street and stuff like that. And I personally, maybe it's because I'm old, I personally don't think a lot of that can be replaced by Gen AI. You have to have, we have to be on the journey with our clients, like shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. We have to be on that journey when they acquire a company, when they integrate, when they transform, the combined. We have to be on that journey with them. We have to be providing them with really solid advice that's based on, that's very informed. And some of it might be informed by Gen AI, but a lot of it is informed by the people that we have, the experience that we've had, and I think that will continue, and it should continue, because otherwise there's, I think our clients trust us that we're going to help them make the right decision, whether it's the decision they thought they were going to make. First of all, sometimes we have clients that really want to acquire a company, and then afterwards we've done all the diligence work across the different the financial, the IT, the operational, commercial, you name it. It comes out that we don't think this is a good option for us. Okay. So I think Gen AI has helped to accelerate things, and it's mainly around processes so that we're quicker to insight. But then I still think there's a lot of humans that have to be involved based upon knowledge and things like that, based upon our experiences and the relationships that we have and what we know about the industries and the competitors and things like that.
I've used Gen AI. This is the output. This is fast. We use the best models. We had a little bit of a human in loop, but I think you hit the nail on the head, right? You're working hand in hand. You're part of that journey with these clients, and I think it's so much of relational reading between the lines, where AI can be rather, innocent in terms of just taking the text or inputs as it and doesn't really understand stuff.
And I think AI it cannot ask us answer the why question. Okay, why does this happen, or why is this customer buying from the target, or why is the target increased its margin by 15%. Okay, now Gen AI might be able to get you somewhere, but it's probably based upon something that that is more human and not necessarily in the data and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's maybe you and I need to have like a conversation every 6 months or every year, just to go back to what we said and just to keep an account of how things are going. But I think I'm not a digital native, okay, and I can see how it's really helping us. But then I ask the why question all the time. Why is it saying that? What does it mean to our clients? How should they be thinking about it? Is this still the right investment for them? And things like that. So
Wonderful. Gillian, this was such an insightful
yeah, I
conversation.
loved it. Loved it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
uh, I got to learn a lot of things in terms of, how big firms are thinking, in terms of how traditional consulting was done, how is that changing, the role of governance, the role of, that traceability, that authenticity, but also the relationships, the culture, the softer aspects that are very difficult to kind of solve for. But also to hear your perspective on how you think about the speed to insight, how the workforce will need to be trained, and what are some risks and dangers that we should be all mindful of. And we just can't compromise on that first week of training that associates kind of go through. I think that's super critical still, to take away all the Gen AI tools and make them work the old school way. I
Absolutely.
think that's important. But this was so nice, Gillian. We really, really appreciate you spending time. We have a lot of insights and takeaways that our audience are really going to love. And we'll stay in touch. And I would love to kind of brainstorm with you every quarter, if not 6 months,
Yeah,
to see
sounds
where we
great.
are.
Sounds great. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thanks. I appreciate the invite.
Thanks for joining again, Gillian. It was
My
wonderful
pleasure.
having you.
My pleasure. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.